We've done French cities, we've done Canadian cities, so the logical next step was to include a French-speaking Canadian city. Here are the stadiums and arenas of Montreal, Canada. Start Percival Molson. Firstly, it's a shame that the name Percival has more or less disappeared. This Percival was certainly worthy of having a stadium named after him. He attended McGill University, where the stadium's located, and he was a prominent athlete. He then went on to die fighting in France during World War I. That's not all. He left a significant amount of money in his will to the university to get this stadium completed. So yeah, certainly better than naming your stadium after Tim Hortons or something. It's a charming old-fashioned stadium in its own right, but one of my favourite features isn't actually part of the stadium. I'm talking about the Montreal Neurological Institute beyond the south end zone, which makes for an interesting backdrop. As you can see, the stadium barely has room for both the running track and the elongated end zones that you see in Canadian football, so the corners have had to be cut off. The field looks like some sort of cracker. CEPSUM, or Sepsum I assume. McGill isn't the only university in town. Université de Montréal also has a football stadium, albeit one that is slightly less impressive. Although there is one thing that this place has that the previous stadium doesn't. Underneath the main stand is an arena, but it's very small, so we don't need to talk about it. Oh, and in case you're wondering, CEPSUM stands for Centre d'Éducation Physique et des Sports de l'Université de Montréal. Wow, you can call me the Hammer because I just nailed that. Bell Centre, or Centre Bell, I guess if we're sticking with the French. This too used to bear the Molson name, but that was in reference to Molson Brewery, which is based in Montreal. This is the largest arena in the land of Canada, but also in the NHL. It's actually the largest ice hockey arena in the democratic world. It's also one of the busiest arenas of any kind in the world. And the Montreal Canadiens are the most successful NHL team of all time. Okay, enough accolades. Let's talk about the actual design. Well, the interior consists of a simple, symmetrical triple-tiered seating bowl. Nothing revolutionary, but elegant nonetheless. Oh, and talk about convenient public transport. Go on, talk about convenient public transport.
Well, in this instance, spectators can leave Central Station and arrive at the arena without even having to go outside in the elements. There's basically an underground city.
Okay, enough of that, but thanks.
No worries.
And sorry if I was a little rude earlier.
No, it's alright.
No, this tennis stadium's not named after Iga Swiatek, the prominent Polish tennis player, but I think we knew that already. Stade IGA is named after a supermarket chain. This tennis stadium has a bit of a strange origin story. It was built in 1996, but it actually incorporated remnants of a previous stadium into the seating bowl, that being Jarry Park Stadium, former home of the Montreal Expos of Major League Baseball, now Washington Nationals. Yes, they converted a ballpark into a tennis stadium. I think you can probably spot which section is a ballpark remnant. It's this one, no, not that one. You stupid anonymous pointing hand can't even point at the right thing. Try again. Uh-oh, I made him angry, but at least I know who he is now. Interestingly, this place alternates hosting the Canadian Open with Toronto, but not as you might expect. The two cities switch genders every year. This year it was the men's event that Montreal hosted. There's also a little stadium next door, as is usually the case with tennis. You know, somewhere for the Kazakhstani ranked 312 in the world to play against the wildcard from Peru. Now we head to Parc Olympique, starting off at one of the smallest of its venues, Saint-Pierre Charbonneau. As of last year, it's home to Montreal Tundra of the TBL, which simply stands for the Basketball League. It's not the preeminent Canadian basketball league. Instead, it's a barely professional league that spans the US and Canada. It's almost hard to believe this was built in 1957. It looks like a clean, modern arena. It's obviously had some work done. Not much more to say. Stade Olympique. This spectacular stadium is nicknamed the Big O, originally because it is O-shaped and also O for Olympique, but that turned into the Big O, OWE, because Montreal hosted the Olympics way back in 1976, but the city only paid off the construction bill, which was over 5 billion Canadian dollars, in the year 2006. A lot of the countries that had competed in those games had ceased to exist by then. There were many reasons for the ridiculous price tag. Firstly, they were very ambitious with the design of the stadium, most notably the 165-metre tall tower supporting the weight of the roof, which is the tallest inclined tower in the world. But also, the construction didn't all go to plan. Originally, the roof was going to be a proper retractable roof, but instead they had to settle on this fixed fiberglass fabric contraption. It was actually replaced just this year, I believe, due to there being approximately 20,000 tears in it. After the Olympic Games, Stade Olympique became the home of the Montreal Expos, as well as the Montreal Impact, a soccer team who have moved most of their games to a purpose-built venue that we'll get to in a minute. So, in summary, it might be a white elephant, but at least it's a unique white elephant. Next door is Stade Saputo, which is the current home of CF Montreal, formerly known as Montreal Impact. It was built on the site of the practice track and field and track for those Olympics. Whilst it is a lot less spectacular than the neighbouring stadium, it is much better suited to Major League Soccer, the rectangular proportions and the more appropriate capacity being the most obvious reasons. Also, these spectators get to look at the Olympic Stadium, so it's a win-win. Or as they would say in French, I don't know, victoire, victoire? I should really learn another language. I mean, if the Duracell Bunny can speak Korean, German and Chinese, then I can at least learn one Lota. That's a language other than Australian. Maurice Richard Arena. This medium-sized dome hosted the boxing, wrestling and the moose rodeo at the Olympics. Whilst it doesn't currently have a permanent sporting tenant, it still hosts fights, concerts and miscellaneous events. Unfortunately, there's no moose rodeo held here nowadays. And there are two good reasons for that. Firstly, the sport's popularity has waned over the last few decades. And I made it up. I do usually appreciate windows bringing in natural light, but I don't know, there's something unsettling about these small slits for windows. It feels like we're inside a giant niqab.
لا يسمح لك بالخروج بدون مرافقة. واحصل على الصوت.
Verdun Auditorium. This has predominantly been a hockey venue throughout its history, but it once hosted the Montreal Dragons, who competed in the National Basketball League, a league that lasted just 1.5 seasons. Outside of hockey and football, Canada seems to have had a bit of a tumultuous history with professional sports leagues. I guess so many Canadians just follow the NBA, to the point where maybe even kids were being bullied at school for supporting the Montreal Dragons. Raptors are better than Dragons, they said, while they rubbed the kid's Montreal Dragons jersey in the mud, stomping on it, spitting on it, and that was the teachers doing that. The current day version is the Canadian Elite Basketball League, and this is home to the Montreal Lions. Before I forget, I have to mention Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, which is where the Montreal Grand Prix takes place. It is pretty much a street circuit, so it's by no means anything resembling a stadium, but there are some permanent grandstands, and parts of the track are dedicated to racing. It's actually situated on a man-made island, so that's kinda cool. Montreal Forum was the home of the Montreal Canadiens from 1926 to 1996, and although the exterior walls are still standing, it has now been turned into a cinema complex. A similar thing happened with the Maple Leafs' old home. Check out the Toronto video if you want to see that. The Velodrome has been turned into the Montreal Biodome, which is like a zoo but for plant life. You can see exotic species like the Nepenthes lowii or the carrot. So not a sports venue, but interesting nonetheless. And those were the stadiums and more of Montreal, Canada. Although there are clearly much better equipped stadiums, my favourite of the lot would have to be Percival Molson. It's just a charming old ground. Thanks for watching, have a good one.